Okay, this is Greg Mortensen with the Utah Division of Air Quality. We're going to go ahead and get started. I heard a few more people chime in, so we'll assume that we got the majority now and we'll get going. Um, this is the second time we do this. Last time we did this was for 2014, so we did that in 2015. Right now, again, it's Greg Mortensen. Todd Wetzel's here. He's one of our permit engineers that did a lot of work for this, for the workbook, and can answer, some of those technical questions if they come up during the webinar here. Catherine Williams is here as well. She's just taking notes today. And Whitney's off having fun somewhere in New Zealand. I don't remember where she's at. Okay. So anyhow, like I said, you guys probably have received letter or communication from us just about this. Just that we do this emissions inventory about every 3 years. We just kind of have it lined up with the triennial national emissions inventory that we have to submit data to EPA for. And so that's kind of why we're on that triennial schedule. And our intent is to stick with that. We don't want to make it an annual thing at this point. We prefer just every 3 years seems to be perfectly fine. If anyone wasn't able to download the workbook or anything, please let us know. As far as I'm aware, I haven't had any problems with that. Everyone I've talked to has had no problems getting those off the website. It's kind of displayed right here, right now on the page. And so one thing, on the site, we've obviously got the instructions, the workbook instructions. These would be in PDF. But make sure you'll want to get a copy of those because they're really detailed and they kind of step you through each worksheet as you go through the workbook. And they're a key resource to refer to. Really, the webinar is just kind of supplement the instructions and just an overview. I mean, as we go through the workbook, we're just going to be kind of going from one thing to another reasonably quick, just to be respectful of people's time. And like I said, it's some more in-depth or detailed, step-by-step directions are really in the instructions. Let's see. So again, we'll go over each worksheet in the workbook and answer any questions you might have. Again, if you'll just hold the questions, I'll leave a spot for questions at the end of each worksheet. So if there's something that comes up for that worksheet, again, feel free to chime in at that point. And I'll let you know. Again, if you're not on the contact list and you want to be on there, just shoot me an email. It's gmortensen@utah.gov. So again, gmortensen@utah.gov. And again, we'll be as brief and to the point as possible and get moving through this. So remember, most of this is fairly straightforward, especially if you know your equipment and your facilities. Any questions, again, just give us a call or phone, or an email, and we'll help you out with any things that might come up. And if you need supporting documentation to turn in, that's, again, we've got the upload site going now. And with that, maybe we'll go into this first tab. So the first tab on the workbook is, now if you have the old version, it's fine, the so-called version. I just updated this and posted it on the website yesterday. And this actually has the instructions now for how to upload your workbooks and your documentation. And so, the first step is just going to the autosciencetech.org site, or ogei.autosciencetech.org, and requesting an account. That's a fairly straightforward process. Again, if you follow these steps here, everything should go pretty easily. It's been tested. We did run into a little minor issue yesterday, and we're able to work through that pretty quick, fortunately. With for some reason, one of the logins was having some trouble. But once you request an account on that site, just be aware that right now the site, because of some mail server issues that the developers have run into, the basically the facility they work at wouldn't let them use their mail server, so they're setting one up for us now. But for the time being, we're not going to get emails as soon as you request an account. And so we are actively trying to keep a watch on that site to approve those accounts as soon as they come in. But if for some reason there's a delay or somehow we just, I don't know, gloss over it or something, just shoot me an email and we'll get that done as fast as we can. And then the other thing, because there isn't a mail server on that right now, we can't reset passwords, or you guys can't. So make sure you don't lose your password until we get that set up, because if not, we'll just have to either delete your account from the database, or you just have to set up a new account and upload from that. And once you have it set up, though, it is pretty straightforward. You just go to the file uploader. You'll just browse, select one or more files. You can select multiple files and just upload it, and it'll show your upload history and that kind of thing on there. And then we'll be able to pull those all that documentation through that site. And this is actually quite a bit easier process than it was back in 2014. Thanks to the developers that we had to kind of at the last minute get on this, because the project had fallen through on the state level. So we do appreciate them coming and helping us out on this here where it should have been done quite a while ago. So, okay. As far as the workbook goes, for operator information, this is pretty straightforward. You just need to fill out the fields with your information. One thing to be aware of is that the operator name is used as the identifier throughout the workbook, so it becomes part of that unique identification code. And part of the facility IDs, again, those unique identifiers will use that operator name. And so the one thing on that is if you have a long name, truncate your name, abbreviate your name or something, because as you'll see as we go through this in the facilities lists, let me actually pull up my example workbook here. We'll use that one. So on this one, I just happen to name a test, but if I go, you can see there's that unique ID. So if this is a long name, I'm not going to be able to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it can make it a pain as you go through other sheets. If you're trying to figure out, you have something you want to apply for, facility 45 or 456 or whatever it is, you can't see that number. And so that's why you want to keep that name abbreviated and small, so that it makes it manageable throughout the workbook. And then as far as the color coding, gray means that these are locked fields. There's one exception on the Art Turbine tab. We'll get to that. But you're not going to be, if you try to type in there, it's going to throw up a little error message saying you can't type here, or so you can't override this data. White means it's where to input things in there, the required fields, and then the pink fields mean those are just optional. You can fill them out or not. And then green text are numbers or values inputted by the operator, whereas blue text is stuff that you've selected from a drop-down menu. Any questions at this point? Okay, pretty straightforward. So the facilities list, this is just basic information about each facility that you're going to input. And so you'll want to enter your production disposal data as applicable. In this case, I've named my facility testing. This can be whatever facility name you want. And then I've selected as a production facility. So again, this is that blue text because I pulled it from a drop-down menu. One thing to note is, let's say you had 100 production facilities. You don't want to sit there and go through each one of these. You can paste text in here. Just make sure you paste it as a value only, so it doesn't overwrite the formatting and have things go goofy. But again, you can paste, just do the values only in these. Same with your facility names. If you have a listing of facility names, you can do that as well. And again, just do the paste value only. So after you select the facility type out of the options, you just put in their throughput. And again, this is for production facilities only, so obviously I filled that out. And this auto-populated here is not applicable because I didn't mark it down as any produced or solid waste facility. Be sure to add your permit ID if it's applicable. So if you don't have a permit, again, so these are approval orders or tribal minor source registrations. Place it in there. If you don't have one, that's fine. Just leave it blank. And also note, if you're operating a Title V point facility, you're not going to report that at all in this workbook. Don't report any of those facilities in this. You guys probably, for those of you that do have those, you probably already got a letter for that SLICE database and the online submittal through SLEIS, so SLICE. So if you've got one of those, and it's usually facility specific, those facilities will just be inputted through SLICE. Don't put them here because we don't want to double count them when we submit things to EPA. We don't want to have, all of a sudden duplicate emissions. So those are totally separate. And then finally, just your lat long of each facility. And we'll come back to this production area designation in just a moment. Are there any questions? Okay. So let me go to, the associated APIs. So this one, again, fairly straightforward. You'll just select your facility ID and then list out any APIs that are associated with that particular facility. So for example, if you have a tank battery, you'd list all the APIs that are feeding into that tank battery. And on this workbook, or on this worksheet, sorry, there's enough rows or columns for 100 APIs. So if you need more, if you just call us and let us know, we can, go in and make a custom workbook for you, essentially, where we can expand that. Same with the rows. If for some reason your facility list is beyond 2,000 facilities, we've had to do that in the past for a couple of companies where we've actually expanded that to, plenty for them for their needs, where we've made sure that they had a few extra in there. So just let us know and we can customize this if it comes down to that. So yeah, on this one, that's pretty much it. It's just listing APIs out by facility. Are there any questions? Okay. Production area designation analyses. So this basically a production area. This is something that we defined as a geographic area with similar equipment and similar sample characteristics, with wells operating under similar conditions. So that all leads to fairly similar gas analyses for those areas. And this can be intricate if you're not using defaults. We do have defaults that we've derived from previous year's submittals, and that Todd was able to go through and get those values. So if you don't have a gas analysis, you're welcome to just use the default value. That's totally fine. And that also includes, the top portion obviously is all gray because this is just summarized values, so you wouldn't be doing anything in that. And again, the default's going to be gray because that's something that's just fixed in there. As far as if you do have analyses you want to enter, we have room here for 10 different analyses or gas character composition sections that you can add in your information in here and to customize it for your unique area if that's what you want to do. And then all other areas, again, you can put in your own unique information, and we'll go back to how that's used here in a minute. And then we've also got these component counts by area. Again, these are also, this is related to the default values. So one thing to note, let's say you do have gas composition and you want to add that in here, but as far as component counts, you want to use a default value. Just what you'll want to do then is copy these values or transcribe these values into your production area or designation number 1 here. So if I fill out 1 here, there have to be values here. You can't kind of select, okay, I want 1 for my gas values and then default for my area counts. They're cross-linked, and that's the way the workbook works. So again, if you do customize something here and you need to customize it here or transcribe those default values to, whichever production area. And then just before we go back to questions, so again, on the facilities list, once you get that done, this is where you'd put your production area designation. So if I filled out one, I can put it in here. Again, for this workbook, I'm just going to use the default for this facility. And then these values are used later. You know, this table is queried back later to pull values for some of the emissions calculations. So make sure that whatever you do in that facilities list table, you're accurately setting the production area designation, because it will affect your emissions. And especially if you put in one that's blank, then it's going to, you know, give you all sorts of weird errors because it's not going to have any calculation means. Are there any questions?
I think there's a set number of fields available.
Yeah, there's 100, but we can add to that. So again, if you did, you know, if it was something that you could do, we'd be happy, you know, we'd appreciate to get that. We would like to get that, and we can expand these, you know, as far as you need on that. But if, you know, if it's not something you're able to do, you know, if it's something that you're not able to track or something, that's fine. So this isn't just for tank facilities, though. This is any API associated with any facility. So I use tank battery as an example of, you know, multiple APIs feeding in. Right.
That would still be the way you expect to feed. Okay.
Yeah, we would. Yeah, so it's totally fine to have multiple APIs associated with one facility, and some may duplicate too, and that's okay. These are just APIs are associating with the facility. And then one other thing I should mention, remember on the kind of going back to the production area designation. So if you do have your own production area designation, make sure you also submit your supporting documentation for that. Okay. So we'll move on real quick too on the facilities list. So if you did have production area and you had a long sequence where you had a, you know, production area, whether it's default or number one, again, you can also copy and paste that first one. Just paste the values only in here just to save yourself time if that's what you'd like to do. Okay, we're going to go over to the drilling completions and recompletions workovers. So again, you kind of just follow the flow of this worksheet, and again, refer to the instructions, you know, for detailed information. So you're just going to, you know, first of all, designate which facility, you know, select your facility, the affected API, as far as, again, this is for well completions or drilling operations, gas type, or excuse me, well type. So there's a, you know, drop down there for oil, gas, and CBMs, and then the activity type. You'll select one of these three options for. So here we've, you know, selected initial completions. Let's see if you do have, let's say you had multiple APIs located on a site, it's fine to duplicate the facility ID. So I could put in, you know, my facility ID, next API as part of the affected API. So, oops, I forgot. There we go. Okay. Then you're going to enter in your data here as far as your, you know, your gas and liquids flared or vented during the completion. So I've already pre-populated that with some data here, so you can see just how it calculates things. The drill rig and the workover engines, again, that's the amount of fuel used. And that's only what was used by the drill rig, not other processes. So we're just looking for how many gallons were used by the rig itself. So just make sure you just limit it to that. Once you complete that, you're going to designate whether it's controlled or uncontrolled. And again, this is for NOx. And then you'll enter in your percentage here. That's something you'll hand enter, just like these values again. So if you notice they're green, so that means enter them there in the drop down. Again, flare efficiencies. You know, you'll select whatever efficiency you want. In this case, I've just said everything was uncontrolled. Again, with the flare efficiency, this will automatically populate based on your selection from the drop down. And then we've got your release point. So if it's a stack or fugitive, in this case, we just left everything as fugitive. But you know, if you have a stack, you can select that and it'll populate the data with, and this is stuff you can overwrite. Okay, so if you have your own parameters you want to add in there, these are just default values. Again, from analyses we done on last year's data. But you're welcome to add your own values in there to customize that. And then again, the gas flaring release point, same thing, you know, with those parameters. And then this is, again, this is in Grace. These are locked cells. These are our emission factors that'll go through and calculate everything for both, you know, the venting and flaring, as well as the you know, engines and completions. So kind of just finishing this, I mean, we're pretty much at the end of this this one here. Again, the emissions will be calculated for you based on that data you'd entered. Are there any questions on this one? Oops. What this is. Okay, my computer's, hold on a second, what's it doing? Let's go back here. So on the release points, yeah, the diameters in feet would be how it is the designation. The height and diameter are both in feet as far as the units go. Okay, Todd's saying there might be a typo on that. It should be in inches. Sound doesn't have one of my. Yeah, it should be in inches.
4 foot stack diameter.
Yeah. I don't say 2 feet. Oh, yeah, that's 6 feet. Yeah, so that should be in inches. So we'll. Can you write that down? We'll get that fixed. I don't know, man. That's been. I think that was there since last year. How the heck do we not catch that? Well, thanks for catching that. It's on both these. It's on the drilling completion. So we'll take care of that. So yeah, inches. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on the drilling? Okay. That brings us to Rice and Art turbines. So on this one, we're just going to designate well, first of all, the instructions, again, will be a good resource. This one's a fairly involved tab. But again, for the engines, you're going to, add in the information that's requesting and make, model, the year is manufactured, and the type. So again, we've got several you can select from there. Horsepower and the annual hours of operation. In this case, I've just said it's going 24/7, and then we're going to designate the category. And again, that's from a drop down, so you got fair amount of categories you can pick from. Once we get that, the units and heating value are usually auto-filled, and that's based on the engine category selection. So these things are all going to auto-fill, and then you just have to enter the fuel combusted and the heating value. And then if you have several engines that are essentially the same, you can just duplicate that heating value on those. And so also on this tab, again, if you need to paste stuff in, that's fine. If you have multiple similar parameters, just go ahead and paste it in. Again, just use the value only portion of that. You'll add in your controls, and again, those are going to be entered in for your NOx. And again, there's our stacks in inches for our diameters. And again, that's something that you'll designate here as well, whether it's stack or fugitive. Okay. For this next section, so remember where I said that all the gray fields are pretty much locked, that you can't change anything on there. This is the one that's an exception to that. So in this case, I'm using pre-populated data because if I choose AP42, it's going to populate. Let's say I go down to use a stack test or a manufacturer spec. You can see that everything remains blank. Okay. So that's something you guys are going to end up entering yourselves. Why the delete keeps doing that? We'll take it around there. So for those, you'll end up overwriting this formula, and this isn't, again, in one of these gray cells, and that's fine. You'll just overwrite the formula, add in your factor and units, and you'll just leave your category blank because you're using one of these other selections. And again, that's going to be pollutant specific. So if you do overwrite that and you go, you realize that you've overwritten it and you want to go have the formula back in there, you can copy it from one of the other cells, or if you need to contact us, we can take care of it for you and send it back to you. Fix that formula, replace that formula. In this case, I just kept things simple and just went with AP42. And so again, that's pollutant specific as far as what is in the drop down. So in these, in this instance, I've just gone AP42. It's filled in the information for me. Through all these different categories. Let me see, there's one as well for formaldehyde. There's a few. Some of these engine categories, just be aware if you get an engine category that, I can't remember which one it was now. There's one of these somewhere that's an NA for formaldehyde. And that's fine. So if you're picking from these and it goes NA or 0, don't worry about it. It's fine. It just doesn't have the emission factor for it. And again, emission factors are pollutant specific. So for example, here on this one, I can use NSPS, quad J, for the CO factors. So that is available to you. The one thing we caught in 2014, and I don't think this is anything intentional, just be aware when you're selecting drop downs, especially if you don't, just do the paste value. We'd see someone that they'd start with a rich burn, and we'd end up with, one category was lean burn or, something else, or I think they just accidentally click down. So just when you get done with this, or as you're going along, just make sure that the category you're selecting is consistent across each pollutant type. So in this case, we just did the rich burn. So again, once that's complete, all this will calculate on its own unless you've put in your own values for the emission factors. Then you'll have to calculate those and enter them here. And again, obviously there's a formula in there you can overwrite. So if you do need to replace that, you'll have to pull it from one of the other cells and make sure it's referencing the correct cells and everything, or just contact us if you need to contact us to replace that or restore that. Were there any questions on this one? Okay. That puts us to separators and heaters. Oh, and again, I think I brushed on this, but again, if you have multiple engines with the same specs in this facility, you can sum up their data as under one line. So again, you're going to have the fuel combustion, the heat value is going to be summed. So that is an option to you. We had a question about that in one of the other webinars. Okay, for separators and heaters, again, you're going to select your facility, select the type of heater it is. In this case, I've set it as a separator. Your duty ratings and your annual hours of operation, you're going to enter. This other stuff is calculated for you based on that. Again, controls, you're going to add in your control, and this one will, for low NOx burners, it'll automatically populate that. Then stack parameters, add those in like we said before, and again, this one's pretty simple after that. Everything kind of takes care of itself thereafter. And then that'll add up your emissions estimates based on the emission factors. And something I forgot, on each one of these tabs where it's collecting emission factors, it'll give you the total for all your facilities at the very bottom. So for here, and again, if I go to Rice and Turbines, we shoot to the bottom and it'll show that as well. It'll sum all that up for you. Okay, as far as separators and heaters go, were there any questions on that? Okay, and then if you have, comments or something, obviously there's no comment field in this particular tab, but there is in the, if you go back to the facilities list here, there's a comment area where you can put comments about that particular facility. So that might be a place if you did want to note something or make us aware of something, that's a good place to put it.
Okay. Well, on the tank heater, I don't know how many other people.
Are there any other questions? Okay, and then kind of similarly to the Rice and Turbines, if you have multiple heaters of a facility with the same specs and controls, you can also sum up their heat value here as well in their hours of operation. So it'll allow you to do that. Okay, that moves us on to the dehighs. So for dehydrators, a lot of this is kind of broken record. You put in your facility ID number, select it, and then add in your parameters as far as your gas process, your unit ratings, and hours of operation. Again, you'll select your dehydrator type from the drop down. We've got 5 options there. Your glycol circulation rate is in there. And again, so here's where your production area designation comes in, cell populates. That's why it's important to make sure you fill that out and selected one for each facility in that facilities list tab. And those, and again, that's linked to that facilities list entry. So make sure you do get those filled out. If not, this is where things will go squirrely if you don't have that in there. And remember that data here should be in annual numbers. So that's, the gas processed and total hours of operation should be biannual numbers based on the calendar year. And so again, we'll put in, you'll add in whether you have a controlled, there's combustors or VRUs and the percent control, your stack parameters, and then here's where you're going to enter some more data. So again, the gray areas are just self-calculating. You don't have to adjust those, and again, you won't be able to in this tab. For volume of gas, again, that's an annual number, and you'll go through that. Add those in for your combustor pilot, and then for your emission factor. This is something you're going to have to provide on your own. This is that you'll need to run GlyCalc or ProMax. And remember, as you're doing your GlyCalc and ProMax, that's something you'll also just have to submit as part of your supporting documentation. So remember, if they're set, if the set of runs is the same, provide at least one of those runs. So basically, if they're similar to representative area, it's similar to the representative area samples we discussed in the production area designation analyses. So if the dehighs are running under the same condition, the emission factor need to be representative of just those dehighs using that you're using that sample emission factor for. So again, if they're all in the same exact conditions, then you can replicate that emission factor. And then based on this factor, your emissions for each facility will be calculated. And again, if we scroll down, I'll give you the total emissions for all facilities. There are any questions on this tab? Okay. Okay, for the tanks tab, same, a lot of this is fairly similar. Facility, your ID number, facility type. We've got a few of them there because, this is where some of our disposal facilities, again, that's only if it's no injection, and then your injection facilities. I can select here, in this case, I've just done a production facility. You put in your number of oil tanks, their tank temperature, and again, this would be average annual tank temperature. And their annual throughput is required for all the oil, condensate, and water tanks. And so you'll add all that information in. Again, there's your production area designation comes into place, the gas analyses. Then you'll have your, again, there's your annual throughput. And then if you have any controls, you'll select the controls here. Again, VRU, you got the VRU, combustor, no control, you can select from. And for disposal facilities, there's a section here for your percent oil recovery that you want to designate. And then your stack parameters, been through that. In combustor, kind of seeing what we saw in the other tab again, your combustor pilot, you'll put in your yearly volume of gas. Okay, and everything else here is kind of calculated, for you. At this point, though, you do have to do some of your own work through using E&P tanks, CPA tanks, or best guess bags equations. And so this section is going to be all manually entered and calculated. One thing to note, though, is you can do your standing, working, breathing, and flash emission factors separate, So either you're going to fill out these two, or if you do them as a combined, you'll fill out this one. So in this case, I did it as combined. So at no time, either you're doing the flash and standing, working, breathing, or you're doing the combined. So we shouldn't see values for combined plus one or both of these. It should either be these two are filled out or the combined is filled out. So again, in this case, I've done a combined, so that means the other two can stay blank. And once I do that, the water tank emissions are calculated, and then you'll put in your oil or condensate tank emissions, and then this will add them all up automatically. And again, that gives you your total per facility. Scroll down, it'll give you the total for all facilities. And then, so are there any questions on this? So again, on this one, you may have some supporting documentation you'll want to submit. And that's pretty much it for this one. Are there any questions on this one? Okay. So remember on this one, the main thing is you've got to manually enter this and make sure this accounts for controls. So don't put in the uncontrolled amount. We want this after controls in here. Okay. That gets us to truck loading. So this one's pretty straightforward again. You're just going to put in your facility, how many barrels were loaded in the year. Again, you've got several options for mode of operation you can select from for your facilities. Vapor pressure, your weight, again, the temps and rankings. And your controls, and then they'll calculate it for you at that point, again, by facility, and then down the bottom will give you your facility total. Are there any questions on truck loading? Okay. Pneumatic controllers, again, you're going to put in your facility and then input the device numbers in each type for the facility. And again, this is average annual hours per device. So in this case, I just said it was 24/7 for these devices, and it'll calculate your emissions for you. Are there any questions on this one? Okay. So for pneumatic pumps, so you're going to input the devices for each category. So again, for your facilities, it may end up duplicated depending how many you have on there. But again, you'll have the different pump types you can select from, and then their functions. And you have a drop down there to select from one of those options, their annual hours of operation, their vent rate, whatever controls you may have, that you'll select one of those and then enter the percent control for it. And your release point parameters, and again, this will calculate the emissions for you at that point. There any questions? Okay, fugitives. Facility ID, it'll automatically populate your production area designation for you. The type of production, you'll want to designate that, because it'll influence your emission factor that's applied. And then again, your total annual hours of operation, and everything's calculated at that point. And the production area, this is where some of for the production area designation, the component counts can play into this one. Are there any questions on this one? Okay. So this is produced water and injection. So these are for some of our produced water facilities. Again, you put in your facility ID, and then you're just going to want to answer the question whether you operate a skim pond, as that will influence how the emissions are calculated. Then you'll enter your evap pond annual throughput and your injection well annual throughput. So something to note is for the evap ponds, only report evaporation pond throughput in that field for wastewater that remains in the evaporation pond throughout its processing and never enters an injection well. So this is basically where it's going to evaporate, and that's it. It's not getting injected at all. If it's going to be injected, that's, you'll want to put that in the injection well throughput. So wastewater that is placed into a skim pond or evap pond and later transferred to an injection well would be reported in the injection well throughput and not in the evap pond throughput field. So, and then finally, if wastewater is directly injected without going into a skim pond or evap pond, the injection well throughput, you'd still report it, in the injection well throughput, but the skim pond here would be listed as no. You'd have a no option, and then the evap pond throughput could just be left blank or with a 0 in there. And it'll calculate your emissions based on that. So in this case, basically I've said that I'm operating an evap pond, and some of it's also being routed to an injection. So some of it's just staying in the evap pond. I've got 1,000 barrels, whatever numbers just sitting in the evap pond and evaporate out, but then I've also taken 1,000 barrels and injected it separately. So those would not, that's why I don't have 2,000 here or anything like that. That's staying for its life in that evap pond and not being injected, whereas this is water I injected. Are there any questions on this one from any of our produced water facilities? Okay. So centrifuges, fairly simple. We're just going to put in the facility ID and your throughput, and then any type of control you have on, and the control percentage. And then again, they'll calculate your emissions for that facility, and then down the bottom for all your facilities. Are there any questions on this one? Okay. So solid waste facilities, fairly similar. Your ID, your annual throughput, and then your disposal type. There's different emission factors depending on which one you're operating. And then they'll calculate your emissions from there. Are there any questions on this one? And just be aware for the produced water and the solid waste disposal, if you're sending your waste off-site or your water off-site, which a lot of you do, you don't need to report that. It's just the facilities are actually processing this stuff. So we want to avoid double counting. So this is just the facilities that are actually processing this material in the water. Okay, and that pretty much brings us essentially to the end. So the last tab's self-calculated, or you don't have to do anything for this one. This will calculate your emissions for your entire company for everything you submit in the prior worksheets. And once you have that done, you just want to again follow the instructions and save it with your company name, and then you can again go either on the website. We've got the upload instructions. This is the old one I had pre-populated, but you'll want to go to your upload instructions in the workbook or on the website, So if you've got the new workbook, this is what it looks like, or we added that into it. If you've got the old one, that's the one I was using. Either one of those you can use. This isn't, we don't need, obviously this doesn't have any data we need in it, but those instructions are on the website. They're in the new workbook. They're in the new instructions. I posted the website as well for the workbook instructions. So assuming the software worked, this webinar is recorded and we'll post the webinar as soon as we get it processed and edited. And again, if you have any questions or need any customization on this workbook as far as the rows or column totals, let us know. We're more than happy to, any feedback as well as calls, questions, and help you in any way we can on this. And just remember to submit all your data through that upload site as well as your supporting documentation that you'll need to submit. And like I said, those instructions are really a key resource. We went through this. Hopefully that helped as a good overview, but any detail, I would take a look at the instructions. And again, feel free to give us a call. If there's nothing to report there, I think we had a question the other time that, hey, what if I have a shut-in well or wells that haven't produced? Yeah, you don't need to report. Remember the threshold is one ton of any cap pollutant per year. So if you don't have, if that doesn't, meet those criteria, yeah, there's no point wasting your time to put all that data in. That's fine. We're happy to take the data. It's just, it's not going to produce any emissions. It's not really anything that needs to be in there. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with if you don't have it. Yeah, absolutely leave it blank. Any other questions on anything?
An initial impression I had going through the workbook.
Okay, yeah, if you have a chance, maybe shoot me an email on some of the terms you're looking at that were a problem, and we can definitely look into that. I know some of them are.
I have it the same way.
Yeah, and some of that is actually addressed in the instructions, or it's, but maybe there's some things we're missing in that. So again, that separate instructions document. And then again, on some of these things, also make sure you're looking. Should have mentioned this as well, that if you see those little notes on some of these categories, if you scroll down, it's noted down the bottom, and they'll provide definitions. Okay, are there any other questions from the group? Okay, with that, I guess we'll close it up, and we'll wait to hear from you and wait to watch for your submissions. And again, give us a call if you have any questions or concerns. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.